Hi, everybody. Kelvin Harned, Ryan Hoke here. Buckle up. We've got winter storm. We really don't name these storms. The Weather Channel calls it Blair, but
I didn't even know. That's the first I'm hearing of this, believe it or not.
Well, we're going to walk you through the data that we have this evening, and a lot of folks are just jumping in. The news push just went out, so more and more folks will be jumping on. Settle in. We're going to take up the next hour or so here and go through a lot of data. This is a pretty big winter storm, something we haven't seen the likes of, and quite some time, in fact.
2021, we had a pretty good snowstorm here. And if you want to go more than 5.5 inches, that's 2018. So it's been a wet.
Yeah. And this is going to be all modes of precip. So we're talking ice, snow, and some places to our south, cold rain, a little sleet mixed in, and freezing rain. That encapsulates the ice part of that. So we do have the alert day that's in place. Again, a lot of folks are just jumping in. So we're going to give you a little time to come in. If you have the opportunity to share this post, we want to inform as many people as we can because some people are like, well, I didn't know that was going to happen, or they were watching these armchair. I've been calling them social mediaologists.
So original.
Yeah, right. That's been out there for a while. But these people have been putting out maps of data for a long, long time now. You'll notice if you follow our team from Wave, our maps came out with numbers today. That was the first push of numeric data that we pushed out, meaning how much ice and how much snow we are thinking. So it's just too hard to do so far in advance. Can we push the models out? Yes. But you know the bad part about the models? If you don't know the bias of the model, or you don't know how to read the model, you're pushing out just raw numbers that are worthless. Fact is, when you saw the 10, 12, 14, 15 inches of snow, that was a model that can't even decipher ice from snow. So you have to account for freezing rain.
And that's literally on everyone's iPhone that they're seeing this. And the default weather app on iPhone, that has been a thorn in our sides this week. People sending us screenshots. Well, it says I'm going to get 15 inches of snow. No, you're not. The weather app on the iPhone that comes with the iPhone doesn't understand the difference between sleet, freezing, rain, and how to mark down which parts of the storm are going to get what kind of precipitation here. So keep that in mind. Your local meteorologists are the best place in this situation to get the information, because the automated AI weather junk that's out there doesn't get this at all, but we do.
Yeah, and by local, he means Wave.
Yes.
There are lots of choices.
Let's start with local and then drill down to Wave, right?
Right.
At a minimum, please get your weather from a local meteorologist, and we'd prefer it to be Wave.
You're going to notice if you're on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube that you can see some people's comments, and we're going to do our best to answer some of these as we go through the next hour. And Luna's saying, ice is what I'm confused about. I want to know. So what we're going to do is go through our forecast here. Let's start with the basics, and that is the alert day, which I've been out of town. I just now came back into town, in fact. So, but the good part is we can keep up with the weather from anywhere. So we've been working on our plan for the last several days. Ryan and the team here with Tawana and Carson have been keeping you updated by saying, hey, the alert day is going to be for Sunday and Monday. And when was that declared? Early in the week?
Tuesday afternoon, we pulled the trigger on this. And so far, we're going to keep it and then some, it looks like.
Yeah, we talked about it on Monday, held off till Tuesday when things became a little more in focus. So here's what we have. Sunday, into Monday. That's when the roughest of the weather will take place. Doesn't mean we won't have residual impact with cold temperatures beyond that, which is what Ryan's alluding to, where we may have additional alert days because of that. But let's get you through the storm first, and that's going to be Sunday and Monday. This is a significant ice and heavy snow event for some. And the questions will now come, what's going to happen in my backyard? So we're going to show you some maps. The key is, as you sit back and watch, you got to know where you live. The dangerous travel, that's almost a guarantee across parts of the area. And the power outages are going to be a possibility too. And we're going to explain why when we get into this icing. And we'll talk bust potential too, because we've had this set up before where it's like, see, they were wrong. Well, here's the deal. We could still be wrong.
Yes.
There is potential. Why is that? Well, the storm is just now coming ashore.
And it's coming ashore near Portland, Oregon right now. Now, I was talking about this on TV all day yesterday and the day before. When this thing was thousands of miles off the West Coast, we didn't have the weather balloon data nor the surface sensor data, or even domestic radar for that instance, to really look into this thing and ingest all of that information into the weather models that spit out how much snow, ice, and rain and freezing rain, et cetera, we're going to get. So as this comes ashore, we get better observations of it, and the weather models get better. So for you weather nerds out there, the 0Z runs tonight of the weather models, which are going to be coming in shortly, are extremely critical because this will have a decent sample of the storm coming ashore. And Kevin, we may very well see some jogs in where the ice or snow may set up here locally based on that data getting a little better from the West Coast here.
Well, when we talk about the data that we have, we look at different models. Some are global models, meaning they are available many, many hours in advance, days in advance. So those models are not as fine in the grid. And what we need are models that are tighter before we can get more precision involved in our forecast. And that really doesn't happen until about 48 hours before that storm arrives. Now, we're in what we would call a medium range at this point. And that's where the NAM starts to become helpful.
Bingo.
That gives us anywhere between 60 and 84 hours in advance. So it's a little bit of a tighter model. The NAM has great bias, though. In winter weather, we know that the NAM overdoes things. So it overdoes cold. It overdoes snow production. So when we think of this as meteorologists, we think, all right, well, this model is cranking out 6 to 12 inches of snow across the viewing area, but that's likely overdone because it overdoes the cold air, especially when we have the warm air advection coming in from the south, which this storm is going to do. Now, the critical part is we need that to pump in the moisture. So that's where you get the fuel, if you will. The intense moisture coming in is needed for ice and snow. And obviously plain rain farther to the south. But for us, it's that teetering on the edge of will the layer just above the surface, how thick will that warm nose be? And that's a critical part of the forecast. Sometimes we don't know that until as we get really close to the event.
And the models often mess that up. And that's the critical part about this. We've seen this bust to rain or just freezing rain many times before. And that's why there's some concern over wanting to make sure that we fine tune this and that folks come back to our forecast over the weekend here and watch what's going to happen because our forecast will evolve. As of right now, this is what our forecast is. And you'll see the timing with the blue bars marking when snow will be the most likely precipitation type in Louisville. And then the pink marking when freezing rain and sleet may be the most predominant precipitation type. And you'll notice that a lot of pink bars are showing up here between Sunday afternoon and the very early part of Monday morning.
Yeah, and let me just say, if this were Indianapolis, it would be all blue.
100%.
They're going to get all snow. And that's where the greater snow totals will be, at least with the data that we have to work with today. For us, this is Louisville. I mention that because as you go farther north, places like Scottsburg, Seymour, you're going to have more blue than pink. Areas to our south, probably a little more pink and maybe even some green, just plain rain down toward the state border. All right, so just know that this is for Louisville. We've got a mix of snow and ice. That ice means freezing rain and sleet. Sleet accumulates, ice accretes or creates a glaze. That's the most problematic. The accretion of ice is a problem. Why? Well, A, it creates a glaze, which means it's tough to drive on, walk on, but it also has a lot of weight, and it attracts or clings to, glazes up the trees, the power lines. And if that gets heavy enough, that can fall. We're going to talk a lot more about that as we roll through the maps. So let's walk you through the future cast. The alert day kicks in at 9 a.m. on Sunday. You notice by 10 a.m. we have snow across the area. If you remember that graph, it started as snow and it ends as snow. But in between, we see that warm push of air come in from the south. That will transition us to a period of freezing rain that will last what looks to be quite a long time at this point.
And it's a problem because as you spend more time under that freezing rain, you get more of that accretion. One little good thing is that the freezing rain will be somewhat heavy. And that sounds like a really bad thing, right? But the deal is that not all freezing rain, not all the raindrops will create ice. Some of them will slide off the power lines and trees and drop onto the ground. So when you have a heavier rate of rain during a freezing rain situation, it's actually not as efficient of an ice maker. Light freezing rain events are often the worst because almost every drop somehow gets enveloped into ice on the power lines and the tree branches here. So the time and the intensity here are problematic, but it could be worse, as they say. Look at the temperatures in the 20s. Too.
Well, and that's going to be the problem. I mean, if it's raining outside and your temperature is in the 20s, you're going to have that ice or freezing rain create the glaze or accrete. The thing is, and Ryan pointed out, if it's heavy enough, some of that just rolls off and it doesn't have the ability to form that thicker layer. Now, as we roll through time, this is midnight on into the morning hours, we still have it. It may lessen some. This is what we would call dry slotting.
Yep.
If the area of low pressure moves through, on the backside of that, we can get a dry slot of air. That saves us a lot of times around here from having over precipitation totals, meaning it's like, well, what happened to that snow you called for? We got a burst of it. It happened. The area of low pressure passed by. It quits snowing before it ends as additional snow, or precipitating in this case, because it may not just be snow, it's freezing rain. But the idea is sometimes that dry slot can really cut down on totals. So a couple of bust potentials that we'll be looking at. One will be this dry slot. Does it happen? We're banking on that's going to happen. You saw it in the chart that we showed you. That's where those precipitation chances came way down. So we were at 80, 90, 100% chance of freezing rain. Then it dropped down to like a 30, 40% chance. That's that drier air coming in. That's the dry slot. That's one thing that can create bust potential in a forecast. If it either lasts longer, which means even less precipitation, or it doesn't last as long and you get more precipitation. Either way, it's bust potential. So that's one of the factors. Another is, what type of icing are we seeing? Are we getting the freezing rain, or is it sleet, which again, little ice pellets that fall? Very different than freezing rain, which creates that glaze. Sleet, which is a thicker column of colder air at the surface, also can bust a forecast, because if we're looking at it in terms of freezing rain, well, it's not accreting, it's falling, but it's not snow, so it's not piling up, and you wind up with ice pellets all over the place, and it's like, well, that busts the snow forecast.
And for those of you who may remember the December 2004 snowstorm, that was a metric ton of sleet here in Louisville. I think we had several inches of just pure sleet when we were supposed to see snow. So keep that in mind. The models often don't see the sleet very well and may consider it as snow or freezing rain.
I think one thing we can be certain about in this is this system will begin as snow and end as snow. The middle part is still to be determined, and exactly where that line lines up between freezing rain and snow. So we're going to go through some maps with you on accumulations. Let's jump into that, and you'll see that all of this is out of here by Monday evening. All right. So once the precip ends, now we're left with what problems will be occurring because of what has happened. So let's talk about the ice accretion. This is the freezing rain. This is not sleet. This is not snow. This is rain that's falling in a subcooled environment. It glazes on top of things. It creates slick walking, driving, covers everything. Weight on the trees and the power lines. You can see our forecast today, again, shifting a little bit farther to the south, as opposed to we didn't put our numbers out yesterday, but internally we have been working on this for a while, and it looked like that 1/2 inch mark may have been even a little farther north across parts of southern Indiana. But today's data has pushed it just a little bit farther south.
Yeah, and we'll see if that southern trend sticks here. The 18Z European model has come in. I was looking at that during the 7 o'clock newscast, and it jutted north like one county. I noticed a little bit earlier this evening. So we'll see if that sticks. Not a great necessarily model run to look at. The 0Z is going to be really what tells us where the trends are. But sometimes you can sniff out little things in those off-hour runs for those weather nerds out there. So this is not set in stone. This is not our final forecast. So what I don't want folks to do is...
we don't even have the high-resolution data yet to make the final forecast.
So what I don't want folks to do is to look at this and go, okay, here's what we're getting, and then not look at anything else for the rest of the weekend. What I want you to do is keep checking back. And I'm not saying that to get ad views on our weather app. I'm saying that for safety and security. I promise you, my family's from here, and I'm telling them you got to keep up with the weather app and with our social posts here. Wave Weather Now is a 24/7 live stream we have. You're actually watching it now if you just tapped the weather app or the news app's notification. And after this, it'll go back to our 24/7 weather graphics here that will help you keep updated, because we'll be posting on social media, and that stuff will get on Wave Weather Now. And of course, these live broadcasts are on there. So the ice is impactful. 1/2 inch plus. Now, these break points, the 1/10 of an inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, that is minimum 1 inch. All right. So we could have some 3/4 inch ice accumulation or ice accretion totals, especially just south of Louisville with the current forecast we're putting out right now. If that happens, that would be more of a widespread power outage issue. The threshold for that is really that 1/2 inch mark. Once you get there, that's when it becomes a problem. I want to show you just a little explainer about that. That 1/2 inch mark is that disruptive mark that you see right here in the middle of your screen here. That's when that starts and crippling begins. That's when tree and power line damage and dangerous roads really stack up. But notice, even a 1/4 inch, you're still getting some of those isolated to scattered power outages, Kevin. And I know folks like CenterPoint Energy, KU, LG&E have all put out statements saying, they're getting ready for this and that their customers need to be ready too.
Well, and again, a lot of that is now is the time to prepare. Does it mean it's going to happen? Not necessarily. I mean, we're still in that zone of uncertainty this far in advance, which we're closing in. So hopefully by tomorrow, which is Saturday, and the storm's going to hit us early Sunday, we'll start to have more fine data where we can really pin down. In fact, hopefully by 11 o'clock tonight, we can have a little more. But we start to get over a 1/2 inch of ice. That's where you really start to see the problems. And a lot of people automatically go back to 2009 on this, where we had between, in some cases, it was over an inch of freezing rain. You can see that's not necessarily in our forecast, but just shy of that, between that 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, would still cause some massive problems to the power grid. In 2009, we had over 600 and some customers across the state without power. It was Kentucky's largest power outage, by the way. So power outages would be likely. Whether that's scattered or widespread is still yet to be determined. But that glaze of ice, anything over 1/4 of an inch, can certainly cause problems. You start to get over a 1/2 inch, that's where you're going to see the largest concentration of problems to trees and power lines. Follow that with some gusty winds that come in with the front itself that passes by, and that just tends to break the frozen twigs and also would create some very cold wind chills and even colder temperatures where we have snow on the ground. And we'll be bringing in that northerly wind, which will affect that colder air as well to the surface. So it's not a good setup, that's for sure. But again, I stress it's not set in stone. We're getting closer, which is why we put the map out. So that's what we're thinking today. We'll see how that changes between now and 11 o'clock tonight. And every forecast cycle will be updating these maps. Let's talk about the snow potential with this, because the snow is the other part. The ice tends to be the most dangerous. The snow, we're still going to get snow. Remember, we said it's going to snow on the front end. By Sunday morning, you're probably going to wake up and you're going to be like, where's that ice they were talking about? We start with snow, and then we wind up seeing the freezing rain and then another period of snow. To the north, it's all snow, which is why that's painted anywhere between 8 inches to a foot or more in a narrow band. And that narrow band is right on the edge of the heaviest precipitation in the coldest of the air.
Right. That's kind of the sweet spot, if you will, because you get almost no icing, but you have the maximum amount of precipitation, or QPF for you nerds out there, available to fall as snow. So right now that looks like US 50 from Bedford to Seymour to North Vernon. That would be the highest probability of that. Could this shift south or north a couple counties? Absolutely it could. And in fact, we have seen some shifts in the data already today, because this is farther south than we had expected to put that. In fact, I was a little surprised, to be honest with you, after I ate breakfast this morning and started seeing the 0 or the 12Z runs come in, that I was thinking, you know what? I'm going to have to put somewhere around and just over a foot in our very northern counties. That looked like more so Indianapolis before. But here we are. And some of the data this evening, which we'll show you here in a little bit, we'll show you some of the raw stuff if you're curious about what it looks like behind the scenes here. Some of that is going a little more aggressive than even we are going here. So that's how it looks now. The backside of this, that second round of snow that's going to happen on Monday morning, is going to be what creates the most snow for southern Kentucky. So if you're watching us from E-Town, Litchfield, Campbellsville, you may not see a lot of snow initially. It may be Monday morning when you get that 1 to 2 inches that you see there on the screen. So we've got the 2 rounds of snow Sunday morning, and that's going to be mainly in Louisville and north of there. And then again, Monday morning, which would be more of an equal opportunity snow. And it's not often, Kevin, that we have an equal opportunity snow out of a system like this, just because sometimes some folks are stuck in the rain or the freezing rain for the entire thing, and you don't really get much of a backlash snow at all.
Exactly. We've got several people asking questions. We're going to do our best to get to some of those. We can't see them always when we're looking at the data. There's Kathy asking about Trimble and Campbellsburg. We're not going to get into specific areas. You can find that on the map. I wanted to address Kathy's question here. She's saying, why do we get ice glazing or freezing rain when our temperatures are below freezing? And that's a good question, because sometimes if you just look at what's happening on the surface, temperatures have to be below freezing for us to get freezing rain or sleet or snow most of the time, but definitely freezing rain. What happens is we're looking at the column of air, and while it's cold up here where the cloud is, it falls as rain. It runs into a very shallow layer close to the surface of warm air, and that's where we get the rain transition. So it falls into that very shallow warm layer, but before it can refreeze into a pellet of sleet or stay a snowflake, it's now a liquid droplet that hits the surface and splats and freezes, because temperatures are below freezing. And that's where we get that freezing rain. So that's essentially the temperature profile that we look at, a very thin layer of warm air where we have that shallow layer of cold air just near the surface. And then, of course, sleet's a little different, because as we drop the snowflake into that warm layer of air, it melts, but it falls into a thicker layer of colder air, so it has time as it's dropping to freeze into an ice pellet as it reaches the ground. And that gives us a ball of sleet. Graupel's a little different. That's like a soft snowball, or people call it like little styrofoam.
Soft hail is sometimes what you hear it called by. And then, of course, hail is from a thunderstorm, which we don't have here. So that's kind of how the different precipitation types
we'll
work.
be dealing with the sleet and mainly the freezing rain because of that very shallow layer of cold air that we're going to have. If we didn't have a southwest wind coming in, we wouldn't have to worry about it. It would be snow. But because that southwest wind's coming in, we do have the warmer air that's aloft.
And that's how that works. Yeah. So we've been kind of explaining how freezing rain, sleet works, because I've gotten so many questions today. Like, if it's 27 degrees, why is it just not snow? And it's just because the atmosphere is not just one temperature, right? The atmosphere has many layers to it. And those layers are what create headaches for people like us.
Yeah. And trying to pick out that band. Now everybody's looking at that band of 12 inches saying, oh, who's in that? That's the pretty part. Okay. Well,
and that's going to dance around.
That will change and may go completely away depending on that temperature profile.
Definitely
these are maps that we're pushing out today. It's Friday. These came out this afternoon around 1 o'clock. So we'll get a new set of data coming in this evening just before the 11 o'clock show. We'll make adjustments. Oftentimes in the data, as we start to get into the higher resolution data, we're able to just make some minor tweaks to this. So in this scenario, Could be major tweaks because we're just getting into that high resolution data time frame. And we're dealing with freezing rain and snow. So that really cuts down on snow totals if we start to see an uptick in freezing rain or if we see an uptick in sleet in some places.
Michelle Souter is asking, what is thunder snow all about? I remember it back in 2009, and so do I. Basically, it snows so hard that it's a snow thunderstorm. You get convection in the actual snow itself, and you can get lightning strikes that happen. Could that happen? Sure, it's possible. We'll see. Doesn't happen with every snow event, but this one is pretty heavy. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
that'd be a bonus.
Just convection. That would be intense. Now, what would happen there is if we were getting the freezing rain, a lot of that runs off. You typically, when you have heavy precipitation like that, as we addressed earlier, a lot of that would just run off. So it would be just rain.
Exactly. So, a lot of things are going to be happening between now and Sunday in the weather data, and a lot of stuff has to happen for folks to be ready for this storm. So make sure you've got your car battery ready to go. If it's like 2 or 3 years old, might want to go get it tested. Make sure your furnace filter is new, ready to go, so that keep your house most efficiently warm once it gets super cold on the backside of this. Think about things like that. Ice melt too. Ethan Beverly, our friend out there in Henry County, asking, so like a 50-mile shift can bring heavy snow toward Louisville and higher ice accumulation? Yes. Basically, that is still on the table. This will still be moving around. It will be possibly up to several counties of distance, north or south, that these maps will change. So you have to keep checking back. It's not set in stone yet, as we've been talking.
Well, the thing is, if it shifts, as you pointed out, Ethan, one way or the other, we're either in the heavier snow or the greater icing. Right now, we're sort of in the middle in Louisville, where we're going to get some snow and some ice, pretty decent amounts of both, really. But the heavier snow would be at this point north of us, and the heavier icing just south of us. So not a pretty picture either way you go, really, because this system has a tremendous amount of moisture with it. So it has to fall as something, right? And it's not going to fall as rain across our area, not for very long. Maybe in the very southern counties, we may see a transition to just a cold rain. But most of this is going to be frozen precipitation for us. And when you're dealing with this much moisture, it's going to cause some problems. So whether that's the ice problem or the snow problem.
A couple rapid fire questions. Sure. One from Micah here. Do I need to prepare for power outages? Absolutely. Do that. Cheryl, do we know if school will be canceled?
Don't know, but most likely.
Exactly. Done. Easy, right?
Any more?
Let's see. A lot of folks asking this question. Will this be similar to the 2009 ice storm? We did address that. It's hard to say. Probably not. However, we don't know that completely just yet. So we don't want to give you an absolute answer on that. And then Leo's like, well, we'll know on Tuesday what the forecast was. Thank you, Captain Obvious.
Let's see how we did.
Hindsight's always 20/20, isn't it? That's how this works around here. I want to go through a couple more maps because I don't want folks to get so hung up on the ice and snow that they forget about what's behind this, because it is going to be just awful cold here. Here's the deal. We've got this deep freeze moving in. So this is like a even colder air mass behind this storm moving in from Canada by mid next week. These are high temperatures on Wednesday. That's 20 degrees. But what about overnight lows? And this may be conservative here. Overnight lows by Thursday morning of next week may be single digits. And where we have that heaviest snowpack, almost a guarantee somebody will go below zero in our area here. Would not shock.
And this is another bias in the models. It has a real hard time estimating temperatures when we wind up seeing the snowpack that's on the ground.
Right. So that's the deal with the cold air that we will see next week in the wake of what we've got going on for Sunday and Monday. And the problem is, and the reason that we are so concerned, and why folks at home should certainly be concerned, is that you've got the potential for possibly widespread power outages, followed by this mess that you're seeing on the screen here. So power outage equals can't heat house in a lot of cases. And that's a problem. Unless you've got like a fireplace or a wood burning stove, you may be without heat. So I want to make sure folks are prepared for that scenario. Things like extra blankets, ready to know where your water shutoff is in your house. Do you know where your main water shutoff is? If you don't, take some time tonight, figure out where it's at. Because if you have a pipe freeze when your power's out, or even if your power's not out, it can freeze too, by the way, and you have a frozen pipe, you need to shut off that water so that if you have a burst, you don't have city water also coming into your house and flooding your house here. So that's kind of a problem that we'll have to monitor for, is the extreme cold and its impacts on us here.
Yeah, and that's always an issue for a number of different reasons. Piping's one of those. People that have to work outside, the homeless population.
Oh, white flag for sure.
A lot of problems that come with the extreme cold behind systems like this. So that's the cold that we expect to move into the area.
Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to reset for just a moment, and we're going to go through some of the more intricate data behind the forecast here. We're going to show you kind of behind the scenes what we've been looking at, what the model biases are. I know so many folks are interested in that. So we're going to take about a 30-second break. Some folks are going to see some ads here for just a moment, but we are going to be right back. Give us just a second here. All right, we're back with you here on Wave Weather Now, getting ready to talk about the more interesting data. Oh, boy, here we go, right?
Well, let's jump into it. We'll start with the ice. So this is what the computer models see, and you're looking at all of the models that we usually take a look at. This is the NAM, the North American model. This gives us the forecast hours, 84 hours out on this one. The higher resolution is just shy of that, 60
hours. Yep, that's 60.
So
the 3 kilometer.
The NAM paints, we'll just look at the colors here, paints that darker color along and north of I-64. That's where they paint the heavier ice accumulation.
And we don't put
accretion.
Right. We don't put values on these because especially this model can run way too high. We don't want to scare folks with raw data here. So this is just looking at kind of placement. Notice that the GFS is somewhat similar in its placement, and it has been kind of lockstep with the NAM last day or so. Well, really just today because the NAM only goes out so much. But it has been showing the maximum ice being just north of the I-64 corridor. Now, unfortunately,
the thing is, both of those, you have to understand that GFS is a global model. So that one, again, goes out a long period of time. We've had data for that for many days now. And the NAM is a little bit of a tighter grid. We're coming in closer to that 84-hour range. And then we're going to get into eventually the graph. The Euro is a larger model. We're in between runs, but we'll eventually get into the high resolution data. You can see we've painted our ice accumulation just a little bit farther south.
And that's where the graph and Euro are. Apologies for those maps being blank. Sometimes off hours it comes up blank. But know that the graph and the European models here, both of those have a more southerly solution. Those are the two models that really started that downward, southward trend today in the data. And that's consequently why some of our forecast looks the way it does. Now, some of that data is even farther south than what we have. So we tried to kind of be an average of what the GFS is doing to the north and the NAM as well, and then the European and graph model to the south. That way, when we do have to make adjustments, it's not so jarring. We don't want folks to be like, oh, I wasn't in the ice before. Oh my gosh, now I'm in this heavy icing. We want to make sure that we are able to kind of give you a middle of the road solution here so that it can be easier to plan.
Yeah, and the idea is the trends that we've noticed with pushing it south, almost in all of the even higher resolution data that we had out to the west of us.
Yes.
So we've been trending in that direction. So for folks that are asking, why are you all saying different totals than other people? Well, we all look at the same data. How we interpret it could be a little different. So that's where the forecasting game gets interesting, right? Some people, if they just use the raw data, well, you probably got caught up in that earlier in the week. That's why we weren't pushing anything out earlier in the week other than saying we have to watch it. Yeah. And you think, well, they're not confident enough to give a forecast. No, we're smart enough not to give a forecast because that far in advance, we know it's going to be completely wrong. So we wait until we get a little closer where we have some of the at least medium range data in where we can push out some numbers. Will this change? Most likely. We'll either be able to tighten that half-inch band up or move it up north or if the trends continue, it's going to be further to the south.
Mm-hmm.
If that happens, that means heavier snow. Remember, we kind of know how much precipitation we're dealing with. It's a matter of how it falls. Is it going to be ice or is it going to be snow? And that really is, in most cases, it's going to be a mix of each. And it's a matter of determining how much in each place is going to see. And that's where it becomes very complicated. So that's the ice forecast for now. We'll adjust that before the 11 o'clock show tonight, and we'll keep adjusting it throughout the day tomorrow as we get new high-resolution data into the mix. So now let's talk about the snow accumulations. And these are all the model data. And you've seen the graph in the Euro pop back in. The white color is the most intense. And you'll notice on the NAM, they put that up near Indianapolis. Closer to Louisville, it really ramps down. Notice how tight the gradient is as we come down to the southern part of the viewing area. So in that model, you have some places down toward Adair County getting hardly any accumulation of snow, while the northern part of our viewing area up towards, say, Seymour or Bedford or Mitchell are getting a foot or more of snow. So what a difference in this model from north to south. So that's the NAM model. We look at the GFS, very similar. A lot heavier snow in the northern 2 to 3 tiers of counties that we have. So from Scott County on up toward Indianapolis, and even higher totals here in Louisville. What that must mean is there's more snow, less ice for us.
And then you've got the graph, which we've kind of thrown out today just because it's like, hey, guess what? Everybody gets snow. The graph sometimes has some trouble with demarcating where the freezing rain, sleet, and snow are going to be. And it often runs really hot, in quotation marks, if you will, on snow totals here. So this is trying to paint us with this mega storm that everybody gets. I don't think it will be that simple. It would be a lot easier if the map actually looked like that for us as meteorologists, because we just go 100% snow and life is good. The European model. Now, this is interesting because this was kind of the leader of the charge of the southward trend here that started overnight last night. And there is a newer model run than this one that juts that white, like half a county or a county height north, but not by much, and it's an off-hour run, so we're not really giving it much weight at this time. The 0Z run of this, which is going to be the thing that really helps us out overnight.
We won't get that, by the way, until
like after midnight tonight. That's what I was getting ready to explain. That is not going to come out until after midnight, so that's going to be the one that we leave out of our 11 o'clock news update to the snow map here. This will not be updated just yet, but notice it's trying to paint some of the higher snow totals in here across the Louisville area, farther south than the NAM and the GFS, which is interesting, right? And that means it pushes the ice to the south as well, because everything is just south. The HER model is just now being able to see what's trying to happen on Sunday afternoon.
Now, this is important because we can at least start to see the edge of it getting in here. And the HER is important because this is the high-resolution rapid refresh. This comes in frequently. We can get a snapshot of where it's painting the data. So even just looking at that first snapshot, you can see that as that heavier snow comes in, again, it depends on the track of the low, but that could very well paint the heaviest of snow closer to southern Indiana than central Indiana. We'll see how that progresses in time.
And so you compare all of this to our forecast, and you'll see we're not as far south as like the European model, but we're not necessarily as far north as the NAM model, right? So there's some discipline here. There's some conservatism in forecasting just to make sure that we're not doing these wild swings with the model. We're also using our kind of knowledge of previous events to know how this went around here. And when I was putting together this map today, I said, we're in a warm air advection scenario here. There's going to be icing somewhere in our area. Typically, that's a little bit underestimated by some of the data and may cut down on snowfall totals. So even if the European model was right in its low pressure placement, it may not be sniffing out what's going to be sleet and freezing rain as good as it could. So that's why we're a little bit conservative on the snow forecast when it comes to how far south this is going to be. But just know, it's not set in stone. I know we've said this like 4 times now. I know folks are kind of tuning out and tuning in during this whole, half hour, 45-minute long broadcast here. This will likely change. We'll update it tonight. We'll update it for sunrise. We'll update it tomorrow night. And by tomorrow night, we should have a pretty good handle of a more firm forecast of this.
Yeah, and we're going to do many more of these through the weekend. So Carson is here all day tomorrow with you. So he's going to be on in the morning with the updated information on Sunrise, Wave News Saturday Sunrise. And then we've got coverage planned throughout Saturday evening and Sunday to make sure you stay up to date. So you might have noticed I'm sitting here on a Friday evening. Ryan's going to do the 11 o'clock show. Came back from vacation early. Brian Good is back from vacation early. So this is what happens when we have major winter storms. And trust me, if we didn't think it was going to be major, we'd still be enjoying our time off. But this is something, and I'm not saying that to get a pat on the back. I'm just letting you know that we're watching this. This does have great potential, and that's when we want to be a better service to you. We know that you guys need the information, and more importantly, that you trust us for the information, and we really appreciate that. So we're going to look again at the snow and the ice maps full screen. You see the snow map again showing at this point the heavier snow to our north, the lighter snow totals to the south. We're sort of in between with a 4 to 6 inch band across much of Jefferson County, slightly higher totals, maybe extreme northeastern Jefferson County, southern Indiana. And then in the icing realm, we've pushed that a little bit farther to the south, again, because of that trending of the models. And we'll be really hanging on the edge of the NAM coming in here in the next 45 minutes, should be coming in. And we'll wind up being able to ingest that into to update the model data.
Yeah. So all of this is still kind of fluid, but we know that folks are itching for the information. You know, folks have been posting what they're seeing from these hobbyist weather pages, from the cruddy weather app that comes with their phone, and saying like, hey, is this true? Why aren't you guys doing anything yet? And it's all about discipline in giving you guys the most accurate forecast. We're not going to do something we know is going to lead you all astray and give you the wrong idea by posting all of this raw information and not putting our heads into the mix here and using our education to give you a more precise and more, most importantly, a more accurate forecast here.
Well, I think this is where the power of our team comes in, because while we've been off, we've been on a number of calls and email strings and creating plans for our team. We've all been communicating and talking about the forecast. What do you see? What do you think is going to happen? What's happened in the past? So that's sort of how things get crafted. And that's how Ryan's been able to draw up the maps. We had the conversation today. Brian was bringing up a couple of good points. Brian loves the snow, by the way.
I didn't know that.
Right. He's like sitting at home waiting for it to start falling, and then he's going to be here on Sunday. So he'll get to see it firsthand.
He would be up anyway all night long. So why
like
not?
A kid at Christmas.
Why not be on TV?
And of course, Tawana will be in here first thing. Sunday night, Monday morning for Sunrise, and then myself, Carson, and Brian at times through the weekend here. So you'll get to enjoy a little bit of time off after a very hectic week that you've had.
Yeah, so we've been putting together all these plans, getting all these graphics together in the last week or so, trying to get us all prepared, because not only do you need to prepare at home, but we have to prepare here at Wave for this. Got so many logistics happening in the background to make sure that we are literally going to be glued to your TV screen and your social media and your Wave Weather Now appliance, whether that be Roku, Amazon Fire, iPhone, whatnot.
Remember when if you wanted the forecast, you had to be in front of your TV at like 6 or 11?
Yeah.
Those days changed a long time ago. Now it's like, they don't have it. Let's switch the channel. Let's go somewhere else. So we'll have it for you. Just find it. Let's take some questions while we're doing that. We're not the only ones preparing. The mayor's going to have a press conference tomorrow at 5:30 to go through the city's plan. They've been preparing as well. Some schools have also been preparing. We've been on email with a number of them. And even over in Frankfurt, the Emergency Operations Center is going to be up and running, because we know how, if we have an ice storm, how catastrophic that can be. It's not something that we want to see, but it's best to be prepared for. It's always easier to sort of dial back than it is to ramp up.
Yeah, we'd rather bust in that direction than get something that's unexpected, right? Austin's asking, is there a chance that bullseye of snow totals could come near Louisville? Sure, it's possible. Some data is saying that. Right now, that doesn't appear to be the case, but that's why we want you to keep an eye on our forecast over the next 24 hours here. Brian Stevens is like, hey, show us the snow total map again. That's probably the easier on the eyes map, if you will, because the ice map is like, because literally will burn your retinas looking at all that pink here. But yes, here's the snow total map again. Brian Stevens, we appreciate you watching and the question here. Let's see. Oh, Heather, you've got a great thing to remind us of here. Remind people to prepare their pets, bring them in if they're outside, if you're able. You know, the saying is, if you're cold, they're cold. Make sure that your pets have a safe and warm place to be throughout this entire event. I don't want to see dogs chained up outside in the middle of an ice storm, period. All right? Make sure that you're taking care of your pets.
Another thing I'll point out here, some people were asking, well, they say it begins as snow, it ends as snow, what's in between? So again, this map for Louisville will show, yes, we do have snow beginning in the morning hours on Sunday. That transitions to that wintry mix, which will be a little bit of sleet, probably more freezing rain than anything. A little bit of snow mixed in too is possible. That continues from 3 o'clock past midnight. That lull that you see just after midnight's that dry slot that we anticipate to move in. If that doesn't happen, precip totals will be higher, whether that's freezing rain totals or, if it's cold enough, snow, depending on where you are in sort of the geography of the viewing area.
So we've got a question here about the odds of bust potential. Angela's asking, what is the bust potential?
Well, we sort of went through the things that can bust the forecast.
We did.
And the odds of it would just be putting a percentage of that. You know, with any winter storm like this, because we're influxing that warm air, and it's all about how thick that column of warm air is. And obviously, we need it thick enough that the layer close to the surface is shallow, a shallow cold layer. That means that as it falls as snow, boom, it hits the thicker warm layer. Now it's liquid water. It goes into a shallow cold layer at the surface, 27, 28 degrees, hits, splats, freezing rain, because it doesn't have time to form a ball of ice, which we know is sleet, or wash out the cold shallow layer and you'd have just plain rain. So the idea is it really depends on the layer of warm air and how thick that shallow layer of cold air is. Now, one thing that will help us with that we're fortunate to have here is UPS, because we're able to tap into the weather service, who gets real-time plane information as the planes come in and out of the Louisville International Airport. That's critical data in setups like this.
And what he means by that is the little pitot tubes on the front of those UPS jets, they're actually collecting temperature and humidity data. We need that because it will literally tell us how the temperature profile of the atmosphere is, both landing and taking off from the airport, so they can create almost like a vertical profile of the atmosphere, literally from a 757 that has just taken off from Louisville Muhammad Ali International. So that is super critical in an ice storm situation, because you want to see how thick that warm nose of air is, because it can tell you if you're getting ready to either change over to freezing rain or change back over to snow, or if you've got a sleet situation, how long is that going to last? So we'll be in constant communication with the National Weather Service. They can't give us that raw data directly. We've been trying for that for years. Hi, NWS Louisville. We're still wanting that. But they can at least share with us what they know about it and give us what's been going on at the airport the last few hours.
Some folks are asking about the extended and how cold the temperatures will be. So you can see once we get past the alert day for Sunday and Monday, that is the core of the winter storm. Then we're in the deep freeze. Those temperatures in the single digits, with wind chills likely below zero, and some of the actual air temperatures could be below zero as well. That will be determined based on what precipitation is left behind. Are we dealing with a thick layer of snow? Do we still have ice encased across the area? So we very well could be looking at below zero temperatures through late next week, and temperatures below freezing could linger into the following week. So you see it's cold once we get this winter storm past us. We're dealing with that cold flow of air straight from Canada.
And we say that full well knowing that if you've got some widespread sectors of wave country in power outages, with it getting that cold, that can be a dangerous situation. You could easily have pipes burst. You could have folks who may not be as mobile, kind of stuck in their homes. That's not great. So if you've got somebody who's homebound, an elderly relative, someone with a disability, check on them. And it might be a good idea just to go over to their residence, see what the situation is, figure out if they're going to be able to get in and out if they can. And another thing I want to talk about real quick is accessibility on wheelchair ramps. I've been made aware of this recently through a friend of mine. During winter storms, you're supposed to clear the sidewalks, right? Do not forget about the wheelchair ramps, all right? Some folks who are in ECVs and who are in wheelchairs literally cannot get out of their homes after a winter storm because it takes so much time to get those super critical ramps cleared that go from sidewalks onto streets and et cetera like that. So please pay special attention to accessibility in making sure that folks with ECVs and wheelchairs can get around in the aftermath of this storm here, because that's for some folks a livelihood to be able to get out, go get food, go get services, doctor's appointments, and things like that, especially if things are postponed, because obviously a lot of stuff's going to be closed on Monday. And those folks that may need dialysis or other services, they got to get out and get this stuff done as soon as it opens back up. So clear your ramps, cleared your sidewalks. That's my sermon for today.
Yeah, and be careful doing that, because if you've got a glaze of ice, it's a problem for the folks trying to do it.
Exactly. So salt is helpful in that situation. Put it down if you can Sunday morning before this all hits.
And a word to the wise on the salt. This is, again, speaking from experience. I went and bought some salt, put it on the driveway, divoted the whole driveway.
Ooh, depends on what kind of driveway you have.
Yeah, well, it's concrete, but it still depends on the kind of salt you buy, too. Found that out the hard way.
Read the label at the hardware store, kids.
All right. David's asking, at what point would a state of emergency be declared? Well, that's a good question. And Joseph Newton's asking a similar thing. Is this considered a national emergency? Not yet, but the Emergency Operations Center is up. And all those declarations that you mentioned are sort of freeing up the resources to happen faster. And, again, we'll see if one is declared. Typically, the event has to begin, or it typically does begin before that is the case. So we'll see what happens, but the governor will ask the federal government or declare it themselves for the state if that is the case, and that could get immediate assistance into communities that need it. If there is going to be the suspect that we would have massive power outages, then obviously that would likely be done to get things in place ahead of time.
Yeah, and if it gets bad enough, even FEMA could be involved in some situations, especially in that maximum icing area. So we'll see how that goes. We know our forecast right now. We don't exactly know what little minor changes are going to happen over the next 24 hours just yet that will impact our forecast and impact sort of the end result of what you see at your house. So keep up with us here, because this has the potential to be the biggest winter storm we've seen, if not since 2021, since 2018. That's when we had, I think, about 8 inches of snow here in Louisville. And then back in 2021, about 5.5 inches, what we had here, for those looking back.
Asking the question, would you consider the Weather Channel to be accurate when the local news is off the air? Well, here's the good part. We're rarely off the air. Now, it is a weekend, so we're not on as much as we would be if it were a weekday. But we do have a 24/7 Weather Channel.
We do.
And it's constantly being updated. And we appear on it frequently, just like we are right now. So we have increased that frequency through the upcoming weekend. So you're going to see Carson on there tomorrow morning, just after the sunrise program. You're going to see him on again in the afternoon and the evening. And it's a great resource for people to have. You can get it when you're on the go. You can get it online, wherever you are, through the Wave Weather app.
Yeah, and the Wave Weather app, by the way, if you can see that. Oh, I think you can. Perfect. Just scroll on down to where it says Watch Live. And once you do that, you'll be able to tap Watch Live. Boop, just like that. If I can tilt it down. And you'll see the window pop up where you tap, and that's the live stream there. So that's how you watch Wave Weather now.
And you want to know the best part about the app? Will you tap into the forecast, the daily forecast? So if you go to the 10-day, so the daily at the bottom, if you click daily and then you actually tap on the day, especially in the near term, voila, that's data that we type in.
All this right here, this text data is from us.
It's the same data that appears on our 24/7. It's the same data we push out to the 17 radio stations that we do weather for. It's the same data that we give to our own newsroom. So if you really want sort of the sort of magic behind the scenes, tap into these days and read the paragraph or a couple of sentences. That's the information that we're pushing out to everybody. It really is our thoughts, to be honest, of what's going to happen. And for the weather lovers out there, you should really like it. It does change depending on where you are in the viewing area. So if you're in southern Indiana, you're going to be reading something different as long as the app knows you're looking for that area. So you can do that two ways. You can set it to follow me, and no, we're not like following you. It's not like we sit in front of a big TV and be like, oh, there's Joe. Oh, there's Susie. Oh, Michaela's down there. No, it's not like that. But the app, your device knows your location, or you can just type in the location and it'll have it for you.
Yeah, so that's the Wave Weather app. And a note to our extended viewers, folks who are like in Bloomington, Indiana, maybe down in Edmonson County, Kentucky, maybe over in like Owen or Grant County, Kentucky. The Wave Weather app may not actually be the best resource for you, but thankfully, we have a ton of sister stations in and around Indiana and Kentucky here. So if you're a little closer to the Cincinnati area, Fox 19 now, they've got an app up there that you can use. If you're like down in Edmonson County, WBKO's weather app is a great resource. If you're closer to Lexington, we've got, of course, WKYT's weather app. And they all look very similar, but the reason we need you to switch to that weather app if you're closer to that city, whether it be Evansville or Cincinnati or Bowling Green or Hazard, Kentucky, wherever, is because that will give you the most local forecast from that group of meteorologists who also work for Gray Media, our parent company here. We have a fantastic network of stations and meteorologists that cover almost all of Kentucky and southern Indiana. So it's a remarkable resource. Take advantage of it. The app that comes with your phone is trash, just period. All right. It's made by AI and it's literally not going to understand what freezing rain is, but we do. All right. And those national weather apps may not be as good either. Get the Wave Weather app.
All right, one last recap of our forecast here. I mean, this eventually is going to get old if we stay on long enough, right? So
it's been 57 minutes and 18 seconds.
Yeah, we'll hang with you for a couple more minutes here. I want to go through for folks that are just joining, because believe it or not, we've got more people now than we have had since the beginning. So people are just kind of now coming in and seeing this. So I want to go through our latest snow and ice forecast. This is the ice accretion. That is the freezing rain. That is the glaze. That creates hazardous driving, walking, mobility issues, and creates a lot of weight on power lines and trees. All right. So when we're looking at anywhere between that half-inch plus, which we've painted along and south of 64 for the most part. So if you bounded 64 and the parkways in Kentucky, that's our heaviest icing area. That is a zone that we'll be concerned with. When we talk about that, less than a quarter of an inch of ice, we still have problems. Bridges, overpasses where we can circulate that cold air around. Sure, it's light icing on the trees. It can cause a nuisance. It can create even some slick spots when you're trying to walk or hold the handrail. But it really starts to tick up once we get above a quarter of an inch. And if we're between a quarter and a half an inch, that's where the tree limbs start to sag a little bit. That's where it becomes disruptive.
Yeah, and once you're in disruptive, you're starting to get those scattered power outages. Roads become icy because you've got so much water that is freezing that it starts to overwhelm, the situation on the roads there. And then once you get toward a half inch or more, this is crippling. This is tree and power line damage. You're not just sagging, you're snapping limbs and you're bringing down power poles. A half inch of ice glaze on power lines adds 500 pounds to the average power line. 500 pounds, that's a lot of weight on one power line. So that's why the power poles come down, the lines snap, and you get infrastructure failures once you get above half an inch of ice. And of course, the roads, going without saying, are dangerous at that point. Now, for some perspective, I know there's going to be more folks that ask about 2009. In fact, heck, I just looked over and Jan's already asking about it. Hey, what about 2009? Is this like 09? That storm had, in Western Kentucky, especially near Murray State, they had like 1.5 inches of glaze. We're talking a half inch or more being crippling, and they had 3 times that out there. E-Town was especially hit hard. I remember I would drive back and forth from Louisville to Mississippi State University, and for years, all 4 years of my traveling on I-65 through Hardin County, I could see the tree damage from the 2009 ice storm in 2010, 2011, and 2013 It was incredible. It was over an inch of ice down in Hardin County, right? Wasn't the maximum in the state, but it was enough to cause big problems. So for us to say it's over a half of an inch is a big deal, and in some cases it'll be over 3/4 of an inch. So with that in mind, power outages are likely, tree and power line damage, and that's a big deal because it's going to get so cold next week that could become dangerous.
Yeah, and then of course the icing part of the accretion, the heavy weight of the ice is one part of the issue. The other is the snow, which is at least plowable. But if you have a glaze of ice on either side of it, which we fully expect across much of the viewing area, because we are in most places going to see both. If you see less ice, you're going to get more snow. If you see more snow, you're going to get less ice. That's essentially how this is going to work. And for some areas here in Louisville, 4 to 6 inches is what we have painted. The higher totals increase just to the north. You'll notice that tight gradient, meaning doesn't take very long to get into the higher totals to the north. We'll see how that fluctuates over the course of the data that's just now coming in. So that's what we're going to do for the next couple of hours, is go through that data, have a new presentation for you with new maps coming up on Wave News at 11 o'clock.
So stick with us on the TV side of things. And by the way, all of our main weather segments on our newscast, whether it be like the 5:30 p.m. or the 7:30 p.m. or what have you, all of those appear on Wave Weather Now, our 24/7 streaming channel. So if you're looking for just weather and you may not want to see the rest of the newscast, easy to do, Wave Weather Now. But if you were watching this broadcast on Wave Weather Now, if you tapped a link that came from your Wave app or your Wave Weather app, that's where you're at. Easy to watch on the Wave Weather app. Just tap Watch Live for Wave Weather Now. And of course, you can see it on a web browser, wave3.com/weather now. And of course, the Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV apps for Wave Now. So search for Wave Now in those TV-centric app stores, and you'll be able to see Wave Weather Now as the second thing you can watch in those apps. It's so easy, Kevin, and it's always on with constantly updated information here that we generate locally, and that we hand curate, because this is our commitment to you. You guys are our neighbors, and we want to make sure you have the best forecast. That's our job.
All right, we've got a few questions. I'm going to take just a couple of these because I've seen a couple of it pop in. And Gary Allen is asking, I may have covered this question, chances of the system moving further south, still possible. We adjusted our mapping farther to the south based on the model trends already. So not sure it's going to go any further south than that, but it could, because some of those models really plunged it south. But again, we need the higher resolution data to determine what's next. And we'll be able to do that starting tomorrow morning, really. But even tonight, with some of the new medium range resolution data coming in, we'll do that. And then Austin has been asking about the sinks with that cold coming in. Do we need to drip our sinks next week? Well, if you have a history of your pipes freezing on an outer wall, it's not going to be a bad thing. Obviously, with temperatures in the single digits, which could be even colder if we get a heavy snowpack, that could be something that's problematic.
You just have to know where your pipes are roughly in your house. And if they run through the center of your house, you're not as much of a risk. But if you have exterior pipes or pipes that go through like a garage, yikes, that's when you got to really pay attention.
All right. Michael is going to sum it up here by saying thank you to us. And we say thank you to each of you for watching. We really appreciate that. We will be back on over the course of the weekend. And we hope that you'll tune in for frequent updates from the Wave Storm Tracking team. We're going to get through it. There's no doubt about it, because we don't have any other choice. It's just a matter of how long
I didn't know we could choose.
It's going to take us to get through it. And we'll see if that brings snow or ice. So we'll bid farewell for now. We'll see you back this weekend.
We'll see you at 11. Good night, everybody.